All right, just holler if I move the microphone too far from my mouth. So I want to just start by saying this. Recognize this. Recognize this. How much it matters that you have come out today recognizing the emergency that we face, that humanity faces, from the Trump-Pence fascist regime and their determination to stay in power by any means and by all means. And recognize this, how much it matters that you have come out to brainstorm and to plan on how we can inspire, organize, and mobilize the one force that could actually stop this regime from doing what it's doing. And that force is all of you and all of us in our millions of people who represent and can draw from the hatred, the aching in the hearts of people all over this country for what this regime has done, and for the 200,000 and for the thousands of people killed by the police in this country, and the wars and the environment and everything else, the children in the camps and all of that. That's what you represent. And your recognition of that really matters. How much it matters that you have come out today recognizing that we have to start now. That these people are planning to subvert and steal this election requires that we start now. Beginning our protests next weekend. And then day after day. That's not going to be easy. I'm so pleased to see 50, 60, 70 people here, but you know when we get out in the street, that's not going to seem like a lot at first. But we have to start. And if we don't, well, Chantel said before, it's going to be a disaster. How much it matters that you and that we have come together when so many others say, and they've counseled us, and they've argued with us to say, well, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see if he refuses to accept the absentee ballots. Let's wait and see if he refuses to leave. Then we can take to the streets. Well, we have seen and experienced enough with this Trump-Pence regime to know that that would be a disaster. He is going to do this. Name one thing he said he's going to do that he hasn't tried to do, and most of which he has succeeded in doing. Right. It's not just Trump, as Chantel said. It's a whole fascist regime. These fascists are organized even into political movements, even a paramilitary movement coming out of the Christian, fundamentalist Christian political movement. There are powerful forces in the ruling class that are behind this regime. They've purged many parts of the government, especially the security apparatuses, of people who might, in fact, disagree with them, and filled them with loyalists. And we should wait? I don't think so. These fascists are many and they are determined, but we are more. We are more than them. Their viciousness, they're using the Bible as a weapon against us. But what do we represent? Them with their Bible saying this represents plunder. We represent righteousness and justice. You have the interests of humanity. You have the interests, as Jolie just said, of the planet at heart. We have the potential and power of the people that we've seen in the streets in June and July and who've come out again in recent days in a spirit of defiance in response to the non-indictment of the police murderers of Breonna Taylor. And indeed, they have done so now, different than June and July, in the face of this law and order mantra from Trump and the actual killing of people and by these fascist mobs. And this is a power that needs to be built upon. They've shown courage and they've shown conviction. And we're going to have to do no less, and we're going to have to involve them. If we combine the moral certitude and the power of the people in the streets that we have seen around why Black Lives Matter and the fight for that, combined with that, with the moral certitude and conviction that this concentration camps on the border have to end, that women have to have the right to be people, to be human beings, and to not have their reproductive rights stolen from them, that this environment has to be sold. If we act with that moral certitude and then combine that with the millions of people who haven't been involved, but who, as the reggae singer Eddie Grant once said, deep in their hearts they abhor what is happening here, then we could succeed with this. And never forget, as we start this endeavor this month, in the face of everybody saying, wait, don't do that now, that we carry the interests of humanity. So, I got a little more worked up in the beginning than I intended to. But I do want to welcome everybody for being here. We're going to work with each other and we're going to learn from each other. When problems come up or the going gets tough, as it will, we have each other. We have to rely on each other. We have to confide our fears and talk about where our courage is going to come from. When we grow frustrated with our family and our friends who just go about their lives as if the world isn't burning and people aren't being put in concentration camps, we'll come together and talk to each other. And from that, we'll get the fortitude to continue, because what we're doing has to be done because it's right. Remember, we're not doing this just for ourselves. I'm not sitting here for myself. We're doing this because it's in the interests of humanity. That's what this is about. That's why you're here. My second point is this. October 3rd, we begin. But why begin now? Why not wait till the election is over and see if Biden wins, and then if Trump tries to not count the votes, or if he says, I'm not going to leave, and then people will come out in the streets. Simply put, because that'll be too late. To wait is to invite Trump to intimidate and pervert the election every day from now until then. To wait is to say that the Trump-Pence regime is legitimate. It is not. Fascism is never legitimate. Slavery was never legitimate, even as it was the law and the founding principles of this country. Women having no right to vote, no right to control their reproduction, not even the right to have a credit card. All of that was legitimate for a long period of time. That didn't make it right. To be lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, that wasn't legitimate until very recently. And all of that legitimacy could be wiped away. And if you don't believe it, come see me afterwards. We'll talk about fascism. Are we waiting to see if this regime can win an election by stealing it, and then finding ourselves saying, well, what can we do? He won. You see, that's part of the danger of us not acting now. I'm going to get into that. Or should we wait and see to follow the Democratic Party and the organizations that are controlled by the Democratic Party when they say we should act? This is a group that has played by a rule book that the Trump-Pence regime and the Republicans in Congress do not respect. They are changing the rules, and they're telling us to follow the rules. What do you think is going to happen if Trump steals the election? They're going to say, well, we've got to go where they're counting the votes. Well, we should file a suit here, hold a committee meeting here. If you're not in the streets already, this is going to be a disaster. And here's another thing. Do you think these fascists who are right now standing out here on, Santa Monica Boulevard in Beverly Hills, about 200 of them. There's a bunch down in a town south of here in Orange County. They're all over the country. They came out to the Refuse Fascism meeting in big numbers in Philadelphia to try to intimidate us. Do you think they're not going to be out in their thousands on election eve if we're not already organized? This is to seed the ground that we don't even have to, and it would also set the stage for the Democrats to concede and capitulate at that time. Without the kind of mass resistance, we are not going to be able to prevail, and that kind of resistance cannot be built overnight. If you think about it for more than 3 minutes, you will realize what it will take to build the kind of unity we need to actually defeat this regime. Stealing the election is going to require a lot of work, and all of you are here to be part of doing this. People do need to vote, and they need to deliver a resounding defeat to Trump in the election. But even for that to happen requires what we're preparing to do right here. Think about that. They are intimidating people. They are cowing people. He's ranting and raving. People are demoralized. There's articles every day in every paper in this country about this. We're going to be out there giving people hope and mobilizing the kind of campaign against the white supremacy, the xenophobia, the patriarchy that needs to be waged to save the environment. That should be inspiring people even to get out to the polls. Even as it is absolutely true, as we have said since we started this campaign, if we simply rely on voting, it will be a disaster. But indeed, we do have to vote. And what we're doing will actually help that. My third point, I'm just going to say a few things about how we're going to do this, because that is a big question that this meeting was called for to answer. How are we going to do this together? So I'm just going to say a few things about this, and if a few means 3, I'm going to do something that's 3 by 3, okay? So that's 9 things. It's inspire, inspire, inspire people with a vision of what humanity is capable of, and that we are fighting to remove this Trump-Pence regime in the interests of humanity. It is organize, organize, organize people we know and people we don't know to be out in the streets. It is day after day, day after day, day after day, until this regime is removed from power. We have to do grassroots organizing. What does grassroots mean? It means people like us, ordinary people organizing other ordinary people. It means going to your family. It means going to your friends. It means going to your people who you work with, go to school with. It means going to the congregation down the block, whether it's a temple or a synagogue or a mosque. Going out, ordinary people organizing ordinary people, and starting with the people, the thousands of people who have been part of Refuse Fascism over the years. You know, we just had a rally in Chicago, a professor who cited another professor who talked about a village in Germany, and this is very important. He talked about one town in Nazi Germany, and he said they didn't have one thing that maybe could have stopped this. They didn't have a coalition of the decent people. What does that mean, and what does it have to do with what we're doing? It means when we look out there and we see all these different social movements that need to come together, and there's divisions among us, nationality, gender, all these things that we're having to overcome. But it does mean that there's a lot of people, millions of people, more than the 40 million people who follow Trump, who really do want to live in a decent world. They aspire to that. We have to reach into that, and we have to say, for that world that you want to live in, you need to be out in the streets, but we have to organize them. A speech like this hopefully can inspire some people to do some things and help answer some questions. But it's no replacement for the hard work. And it is hard work. It takes time. This has to be tactile. Okay, yes, use social media, but feel the keys, okay? Feel the keys. And don't go touching people, do the elbows but you got to be with people. That's a big part of what's going to make this movement stand in opposition to, by when you look at it, then those fascist MAGA mobs out here that are just spitting venom at each other and at us. We're going to represent something different. That's what I really want you to understand and take from this. And to do this, to get those people out in the street, we need a broad movement. We do need to reach into the Black Lives Matter movement, the immigrants' rights movement, the environmental movement, the women's movement, the LGBTQ movement, and we have to say to all of them, what you are fighting for at this point in history is going to go through removing this regime from the White House. However hard you have been working to save the environment, to do any of this stuff, you are going to confront the fact that anything that has been won can be lost. Any struggle that has gained strength can be shut down. There's unfortunately too many examples from history that attest to this. Right after Hitler was named chancellor, in Germany, 100,000 people took to the streets. And they fought for a while, but they didn't, for various reasons we don't have time to go into here, they weren't able to rally the masses of German people. And a great disaster happened. And you don't have to go back to the 1930s. You can look more recently to Turkey and see how the struggle developed there. And you can see how that is what's happening here. Think about this. 1 month away from him stealing the election, we should have 10,000 people in a stadium right now, or out on a big football field. That's what's happening here. All of us together, planning, relying on each other. That's what we're going out to reverse. We also need to be involving people who have disproportionate influence in society, the influencers on the internet, athletes, people in the entertainment industry, people who are legal people, law students to be doing legal work, people who can help us with medical care, churches who can provide sanctuary, bathrooms, and water, and all of this. We got to go out very, very broadly. What the regime does, but now I want to just get into one point which Chantel alluded to before. How are we going to actually do this? Because we'll do our grassroots organizing. We can grow to a few thousand people doing that. But how is this going to grow to the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people? Well, here's how it's going to happen, most likely. Trump, quiet as it's kept, is going to do one outrage after another, probably 3 or 4 a day. If we're out in the streets every day with this protest saying, we have one demand, Trump, Pence out now, and we're speaking to those outrages and the new things he does every day, more and more people will be looking to what we're doing as opposed to what other people are doing. And will begin to say, you know what, I think they're right. He really is going to steal the election. He really is mobilizing these people. He really has stacked the courts, which he's just about to do in a very devastating way. They're going to see all of this. And then we become something that's thousands of people relatively on the margins of society, is something that becomes right in the center of the debate. Just as you saw in June and July, where you saw Democratic politicians who hasn't ever said the word white supremacy. It's white supremacy. Do you know there was slavery in this country? By the way, that statue was a slave owner. They never said that before. But people in their millions made that happen. And we can do no less, and we have to do much more to drive out this regime. And let me say this. Being just a wee child at the time, the 1960s weren't always the 1960s. When people sat in the lunch counter, in one case there was 9 of them, another case there was 12 or 13, I don't remember. Everybody took to the streets in their millions right after they did this and got beat up. No. There was a process that ensued. There were some people who were first. They acted on their convictions. They acted on their morality. They acted with courage. And then other people who supported them spread the word and fought with other people. I don't mean physically, I mean fought and came into synagogues and into churches and into mosques and said what they did is right. donate money, but get your own ass down there. And many students responded to that. White students, black students, all kinds of people went down and tried to help with voter registration drives and against the laws against segregation. We're starting small, and we have to grow within 1 month. But we have right on our side, and we have what they are doing, what the Trump-Pence regime is doing, and what other forces who we want to act are not doing, like the Democratic Party in the way they should be doing. And I'm not talking about the people here who are a member of the Democratic Party or the people on the editorial board of Refuse Fascism who are Hillary volunteers. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people up top. Because I tell you what, if the Democratic Party mobilized masses of people, the streets would be filled because they have the resources to do that. Then the question would be, what is the demand? And the demand is Trump-Pence out now. We are trying to get him out before the election. If you actually had millions of the people in the street right now, you have a shot at him being impeached or the wise heads of the Republicans and the Democrats going and said, you guys got to resign right now because we got a bigger problem on our hands than just you. So get out of here and then we'll try to regroup. That's what will go on. That's what happened with Nixon. That could happen here as well. I'm just going to I've taken some time, but I'm just trying to round a few things out. I just want to say a brief word about the vision of what we're going to be doing. We're starting at, where are we starting now? Highland and Hollywood. Okay. But then we're going to be moving to a central square. I don't know if that's been determined yet. But wherever it is, and in every city and in every town, in the valley or wherever, what we want to be doing is having a place where people can come every day in the beginning. They can find out what's going on, where there'll be programs going on, discussions going on, where people will be getting lots of materials and going out to neighborhoods, where we have marches that go from the central square out to the neighborhoods. Maybe in this town it would have to be car caravans, or get on the trains, get on the metro. And people will be marching to the town square. If we get some permits, we should be showing films and having discussions. Growing in numbers, the marches themselves becoming bigger and more determined as we begin to fill the streets, ultimately by the time we get into the month of hundreds of thousands of people. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to start something. We're going to have to spread the word. It's not one march. It's a whole process that begins by going to that central square and making an impact on society with that and drawing more and more people in. Now, I just want to say to you that much of what I've said today is drawn from an article that you can get at the table there that's called Trump's Fascism More Blatant and Dangerous Every Day, How a Determined Fight and Massive Mobilization Could Defeat This by Bob Avakian. The editorial board of Refuse Fascism has read this and thought it's an important thing that we're going to put up on the Refuse Fascism site. We recommend that you all read this. I'm going to end with this, which is from our call. The Refuse Fascism's call. You should have that with you. But really think about this. We will act on our principles, modeling the world we aspire to in contrast to the hatred and the bigotry of this fascist regime. We will act together with creative joy and with the conviction and courage of standing together not only for ourselves, but for all of humanity. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. So thank you.